He was a struggling single father, barely making rent. She was a quiet college girl with just one suitcase and a shy smile. He offered her the spare room out of kindness, never knowing she arrived in a limousine parked 3 streets away. Because the girl he just welcomed into his modest home was the secret daughter of a multi-millionaire CEO. And within weeks, both of their lives would change forever. Daniel stood in his small kitchen flipping pancakes on a scratched skillet, pretending not to notice the red electricity notice folded beneath the salt shaker. His 8-year-old son, Ethan, sat at the table swinging his legs, blissfully unaware of overdue bills or maxed-out credit cards. To Ethan, his dad was a hero. To Daniel, he was a man drowning quietly while still smiling for his boy. After months of working double shifts as a delivery driver and still falling behind, he swallowed his pride and posted a handwritten ad online. "Room for rent, female student preferred. Must be kind." He didn't care about money as much as peace inside his home. 2 days later, there was a knock. Standing at the door was a young college girl with a simple backpack and one worn suitcase. No makeup, no jewelry, no attitude, just tired eyes and a polite smile. "Hi, I'm Mia. I messaged you about the room." Daniel felt a strange calm around her. He led her to the spare room, barely big enough for a bed and a desk. The wallpaper peeled in one corner. The lamp flickered if touched. He apologized for everything as if he were ashamed of existing. But she looked around as though he had shown her a palace. "It's perfect," she whispered. Daniel told her gently, "This house isn't fancy, but we look out for each other. If you're okay with that, welcome home." She paused, almost as if those 2 words "welcome home" hit deeper than he intended. She nodded, shaking his hand with both of hers like it meant something. Later that night, Daniel saw her step outside, phone pressed to her ear. Her soft voice suddenly turned sharp, almost powerful. "Tell Dad I don't care if he disapproves. I'm staying here. For once, I want to live like a real person." She hung up quickly when she noticed him watching. A sleek black Mercedes cruised slowly past the house, its tinted windows following her like a silent threat. And in that moment, Daniel realized this girl was not who she seemed. Mornings in Daniel's house slowly shifted after Mia moved in. She woke earlier than anyone expected from a college student, quietly washing dishes that weren't hers, packing Ethan's school lunch with neatly cut sandwiches and handwritten notes like, "You've got this, champ." The little boy adored her instantly, tugging at her sleeve every evening to show his drawings or ask for help with homework. Daniel noticed how Mia listened, really listened, like every word spoken to her mattered. There was no arrogance, no hint of entitlement. If anything, she seemed grateful just to be included in something as ordinary as family dinner. One night, the 3 of them sat on the floor eating cheap takeout noodles because the table leg had broken earlier. Ethan laughed so hard he spilled sauce on himself, and Mia laughed until tears formed in her eyes, not from humor, but from something softer, something aching. Daniel caught her staring at them when she thought no one noticed, like she was memorizing the moment. Later that week, Daniel came home earlier than usual and found the living room transformed. The old torn curtains had been sewn neatly, the broken shelf repaired, and his loose cabinet handles tightened. He walked in confused, toolbox still open on the floor. Mia stood there holding a screwdriver, cheeks flushed. "I hope you don't mind," she said nervously. "I just wanted to help." He stared, overwhelmed. No one had helped him in years, not without wanting something in return. She wasn't a tenant anymore. She was becoming something else. A piece of their lives, a missing fragment they didn't know they needed. Weeks passed, and Mia slowly transformed from a quiet tenant into something far more precious. She became their missing piece. Every evening, the 3 of them gathered around the small kitchen table, eating simple meals like spaghetti or grilled cheese, but somehow it felt like a feast. Ethan adored her. He would drag his chair beside hers every time they ate and brag at school, "I have a big sister now." Mia laughed it off, but Daniel noticed how her eyes softened every time Ethan called her that. Yet behind her gentle smile, there were cracks. Some nights, long after everyone had gone to sleep, Daniel would hear her pacing in her room, whispering into her phone with a trembling voice. Fragments of her words slipped through the thin walls. "I'm not going back. I'm tired of being controlled. I just want to breathe." She always ended those calls in tears, then wiped them as if nothing had happened the next morning. One Saturday, Ethan came running into the living room with a broken toy robot in hand, devastated. Before Daniel could respond, Mia knelt beside him, examining the toy like a surgeon. She disappeared into her room and returned with a small toolkit, sleek, high-end, the kind that didn't belong to a struggling student. With careful precision, she fixed the toy in minutes. Ethan's face lit up with pure joy as the robot whirred back to life. Daniel smiled in gratitude, but his suspicion grew stronger. What kind of college girl carried tools like that? Later that night, as Daniel washed the dishes, he found himself glancing at her more than usual. She moved around the kitchen with grace, too refined, too polished. Even the way she poured milk into Ethan's cereal had elegance. She was humble, yet undeniably trained, raised on etiquette, built from privilege. She caught him staring. For the first time, she spoke without a smile. "You're wondering who I really am, aren't you?" Daniel froze, speechless. She didn't wait for an answer. "One day I'll tell you, but not yet." Then she walked away. And suddenly, the house felt warm, but filled with questions. Trouble arrived not with loud accusations or angry words, but with silence. One rainy evening, as thunder rumbled softly in the distance, Mia returned home later than usual. Her clothes were damp, her hair slightly disheveled, and her shoulders tense as if she had been carrying the weight of a conversation she never wanted to have. Daniel noticed immediately. He was stirring a pot of soup, but his instincts, sharpened by years of protecting his son, flared. "You okay?" he asked carefully. She paused, forcing a smile. "Just a long day." Ethan ran up to her, hugging her waist as if sensing something was off. She knelt and hugged him back, holding on a bit longer than usual. Daniel watched her closely. There was something fragile in the way she clung to Ethan like he was her anchor. Later that night, as Ethan slept peacefully, Daniel found Mia sitting alone at the dining table, staring at her untouched bowl of soup. Rain tapped gently against the window, casting shimmering streaks across her face. "Want to talk about it?" he asked softly, taking the seat across from her. She hesitated. Her fingers traced the rim of the bowl slowly. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "My father found out where I am." Daniel stiffened. She continued. "He sent someone to pick me up this afternoon, his driver. He said Dad's furious, that I'm embarrassing the family by living like this." She gestured vaguely to the small kitchen, the flickering lights, mismatched plates, faded curtains. "He told me to stop playing poor." There was bitterness in her voice, but also pain. Daniel leaned forward. "Do you feel unsafe?" She looked at him, really looked, as if deciding whether to trust him completely. "I don't know," she confessed, "but I'm not leaving, not unless you tell me to." Daniel didn't hesitate. "This is your home," he said firmly, "as long as you want it to be." Her eyes glistened. She tried to hold back tears, but one escaped anyway. Daniel pretended not to notice. But just as peace settled back in, headlights flashed through the window, a sleek black car slowly pulling up to the curb again. Watching. Waiting. The storm outside had only just begun. The knock came like thunder, loud, authoritative, uninvited. Daniel had just finished tucking Ethan into bed when he heard it. 3 precise raps against the door, not the kind a neighbor makes, the kind that expects obedience. Mia froze on the couch, her hands tightening around the mug of tea she hadn't touched. Her breath hitched. She didn't need to look, she already knew. Daniel stepped forward, motioning for her to stay back. He opened the door just enough to see, standing on the porch was a tall man in a charcoal suit, rain beating off his shoulders. Behind him, the black Mercedes idled with its headlights piercing through the night. "Good evening," the man said calmly, but his tone carried authority. "I'm here for Mia." Daniel kept his hand firm on the door. "She's not property. She comes and goes when she chooses." The man didn't flinch. "Her father sent me. She's caused quite the stir by running away. He insists she return home immediately." Mia stepped forward now, voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "Tell him no, I'm not a child, I'm not a possession." The man's controlled facade cracked slightly, irritation creeping in. "Miss, your father is not asking, he's demanding." Daniel opened the door wider, putting himself between the man and Mia. "She's safe here," Daniel said, voice low and protective. "And she stays unless she decides otherwise." There was a long, tense silence. The driver's eyes shifted between them both, calculating. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "This living arrangement is beneath her," he muttered dismissively. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Maybe, but at least in this house, she's treated like a human being." For a moment, no one spoke. Rain pattered between them like applause for the courage hanging in the air. Finally, the man stepped back. "Very well, I'll inform her father, but understand he won't let this go." He turned and walked toward the car. Just before stepping in, he added without looking back, "You have no idea who you're protecting." Daniel closed the door quietly. Mia stood there, tears silently streaming down her face, not from fear, but from something deeper. No one had ever stood for her before. The house was quiet after the confrontation, but inside something had changed. Not in the walls, but in their hearts. Mia sat at the dining table long after Daniel had gone to check on Ethan. She stared at her trembling hands, struggling to process what had just happened. All her life, people had obeyed her father. Even powerful businessmen bowed under his name. But tonight, a simple delivery driver with calloused hands and tired eyes had stood against that power, not for money, not for favor, but for her. Daniel returned to the kitchen and found her still frozen in place, tears glistening but unshed. "You okay?" he asked gently. Instead of answering, she stood and faced him fully, her voice raw with emotion. "Why did you do that?" Daniel blinked. "Do what?" "Stand up to him. You don't even know who I am." Daniel paused. "Maybe not," he said softly, "but I know what I saw. A scared girl who's been treated like a possession her entire life. And I won't let anyone, no matter how rich, treat someone in my house like they don't matter." Mia swallowed hard, her voice cracked. "No one has ever chosen me without wanting something in return." Daniel shook his head. Then they were the wrong people. There was silence, a silence so heavy it felt holy. Very slowly, Mia stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't a polite hug, it wasn't awkward, it was desperate, grateful, the kind of embrace a person gives when they finally feel safe. Daniel froze for a moment, then gently wrapped his arms around her. She was shaking. "I'm not here because I needed a room," she whispered. "I'm here because I needed a family." Daniel didn't speak. He simply held her as if anchoring her to the ground she had never truly stood on. And in that moment, no papers were signed, no declarations made, but something irreversible happened. She was no longer a tenant. She was one of them. The next morning, sunlight poured through the living room windows, painting warm streaks across the worn wooden floor. The world outside carried on as if nothing had changed, but inside that humble home, everything had. Mia stepped into the kitchen early, already preparing breakfast. Daniel walked in mid-yawn, surprised to see pancakes stacked high, bacon sizzling, and fresh fruit cut into perfect cubes like something straight out of a five-star hotel. "You didn't have to do all this," he said with a tired smile. "I wanted to," she replied softly. "It's the least I can do after what you did for me." Before he could respond, a small voice cut in. "Whoa, are we rich now?" Ethan gasped dramatically, climbing onto his chair with wide eyes. Mia laughed, a sound so genuine it filled the room like sunshine. She placed a plate in front of him and ruffled his hair. "Rich in breakfast." As they ate, Daniel finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air since the night before. "Mia, about your father, who is he?" She paused. Her fork hovered midair. Then she exhaled slowly, the kind of breath a person takes before unlocking a door they've kept closed for years. "His name is Richard Harrington." She hesitated, then added, "CEO of Harrington Global." Daniel froze. He didn't know much about corporations or big business, but that name even he recognized. Billionaire, real estate, media, airlines, a man whose signature could make or break entire cities. Mia continued quietly. He built an empire, but he lost himself along the way. To him, love isn't something you give, it's something you trade. Every gift had strings. Every compliment had expectations. "I grew up surrounded by everything except freedom." She looked at Daniel with pleading eyes. "I didn't run away from wealth. I ran away from control." Daniel didn't speak immediately. He simply nodded in understanding. Not because he knew her world, but because he knew pain, in any form, always speaks the same language. Ethan, oblivious to the magnitude of what was being said, happily chewed his pancake and declared with syrup on his face, "So you are a princess." Mia burst into laughter, and for the first time, she didn't deny it. Peace lasted only a few days. It was a Sunday afternoon when the storm returned, not in the form of rain this time, but in the roar of engines. Daniel was fixing the loose latch on the garden fence while Ethan and Mia played soccer in the yard. Laughter filled the air. It was one of those rare moments where life felt perfect. Then 3 black SUVs pulled up to the curb. Not 1, not 2. 3. The laughter died instantly. Men in suits stepped out, all wearing earpieces. Not thugs, not casual visitors, private security, trained, silent, intimidating. And from the middle SUV, a man emerged. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, tall, commanding, his presence alone made the air feel heavier. Richard Harrington. Mia went still, her expression emptying like someone switching off the lights inside her soul. Daniel instinctively stepped forward, shielding Ethan and placing himself between her and the man approaching. "Mia, get your things," Richard said coldly, not sparing a glance at Daniel. "We're done with this little act." She didn't move. "I'm not leaving." Richard paused just for a moment, as if surprised she dared to speak back. Then his eyes hardened. "You are my daughter. You don't get to play poor just to spite me. Now get in the car." Daniel stepped in front of her fully now. "With all due respect," he said, voice firm. She said no. Richard turned to him slowly, eyes scanning him from head to toe. His lips curved, not in amusement, but in disdain. "And who are you supposed to be?" Daniel didn't flinch, a man who actually listens to her. The tension crackled in the air like electricity. Richard's jaw clenched. "Do you have any idea who you're defying?" Daniel stared back. "Do you?" Mia suddenly stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. "Dad, stop," she swallowed. "This isn't rebellion, this is me. For once, I'm not being your daughter, I'm just Mia, and I want to stay." Richard's eyes flickered, not with understanding, but with realization that he was losing control. He turned sharply to his men. "Take her." The security team moved. And before Daniel could react, Ethan stepped in front of Mia, arms spread wide like a tiny shield. "You're not taking my sister." The world froze. Even Richard's guards hesitated. A billionaire, armed men, a father's power. All halted by an 8-year-old boy in worn sneakers. And for the first time that day, Richard Harrington looked unsure. For a long moment, no one moved. The billionaire, his guards, the frightened girl, the exhausted father, and the little boy standing like a lion cub between wolves, refusing to budge. Richard Harrington stared at Ethan, confusion flickering beneath his hardened exterior. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, crushed corporate rivals, and commanded armies of employees with a single word. But nothing in his elite world had prepared him for this, a child's fearless defiance. "Move," Richard said, voice low. Ethan stood taller. "No." Daniel stepped beside his son, placing a hand on his shoulder while glaring at the guards. Mia stood behind them, trembling not from fear anymore, but from overwhelming emotion. Richard exhaled sharply, a mix of frustration and disbelief. "You think this is noble," he snapped. "Living in a broken house with scraps of food and debts piling up, you think poverty is romantic. It's not, it's weakness." Daniel stepped forward now, voice steady but burning. "You're wrong, poverty isn't weakness. Cruelty is." Richard's eyes narrowed. Daniel continued, "You measure life in money, but real wealth isn't control, it's choice. And she has chosen here, not because it's perfect, but because it's real." For the first time, Richard hesitated, truly hesitated. Mia stepped forward, tears in her eyes but voice unwavering. "Dad, do you even know my favorite food? My favorite movie? Do you know what makes me laugh, or what scares me?" She shook her head slowly. "You don't, because you never tried to know me. You just wanted to own me." Richard's mask cracked for just a second. She continued, voice soft but devastating. "I don't want your money. I don't want your mansion. I want freedom and family, and I found both right here." A silence. Not the tense kind, but the kind that demanded reflection. Even the guards glanced at each other, unsure. Then, unexpectedly, Richard's voice dropped low. "You think this is love. You think these people will stay when things get hard. Loyalty isn't free." Daniel met his gaze. Love doesn't have to be bought. Richard looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time, he didn't see a poor man. He saw a father. The tension outside slowly melted, not with more arguments, but with silence. A heavy, necessary silence. Richard looked at his daughter, then at the boy still guarding her like a knight, and finally at Daniel, the man who had nothing yet acted with more honor than anyone in his world of luxury. He lifted a hand and signaled his guards to step back. They obeyed instantly. Mia gasped, unable to believe it. Richard didn't soften completely. His pride wouldn't allow it, but his voice changed. For the first time, it carried uncertainty. "I don't understand this kind of life," he admitted quietly, "but I can see she's happier here than she ever was in my world." Mia's lips trembled. She took a hesitant step forward. Richard hesitated too, then spoke directly to Daniel. "You protected her, something I thought only wealth could do, but you did it without money, without status, just heart." Daniel nodded, not needing to say anything more. Richard looked at Mia again, his voice barely above a whisper. "If this is really what you want, I won't stop you." Mia's eyes filled with tears, not of pain this time, but of relief, hope, healing. She didn't run to him, but she didn't turn away either. Instead, she spoke softly. "I'm not choosing him over you, Dad. I'm choosing myself. If you want to be part of my life, come as my father, not as my owner." Richard stood still. A long pause. Then slowly, awkwardly, he nodded. "I'll try." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a promise. But it was enough. He turned to leave, then stopped. Looking at Ethan, who was still standing guard, he said with the smallest hint of a smile, "You're a brave kid." Ethan puffed out his chest. "I know." The SUVs drove away. Mia let out a breath she'd been holding for years. She turned to Daniel and Ethan. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a runaway. She felt home. Family isn't defined by blood or wealth. It's built by those who stand beside you when the world tries to pull you away. Riches can build mansions, but kindness builds homes. And sometimes, the greatest fortune is not found in what you own, but in who would fight for you when you have nothing to give in return.